Now we're going to start doing some more difficult ones. So the first video is pretty straightforward. Those are pretty simple ones. Now I'm going to show you how to do the more complicated ones, and also I'm going to show you how to do the multiple lines. Okay, so even though they're a little bit harder, same process. We're going to be looking and asking ourselves, how do I set premises to true, conclusion to false? And I'm doing this because I'm trying to force it to be invalid. And of course, if I'm successful, the argument is invalid. If I fail, argument is valid. So how many times do I get a true with a horseshoe? 3 times, not forced into a situation. How many times do I get a true with a disjunction? 3 times, not forced into a situation. How many times do I get a false with a disjunction? Only 1 time. So I am forced to make my conclusion false. Not H needs to be false, and not E needs to be false, which means H is true and E is true. And of course, the next thing we want to do is we want to go through and make certain that all the H's are true and all the E's are true as well. So we'll start over here. Okay, so we got H is going to be true, and then we have a not H here, so we'll just go ahead and put the false down. Okay, so we already know overall, if we look at from the big picture, this as a whole, it's 3 times. Okay, and this as a whole is 3 times as well. So now what we need to do is we need to ask ourselves, what about just this section right here? And what about just this section right here? Will we be forced into any type of situation? So let me show you how to do that. Let's start with the first premise here. Let me label them real fast for you. Okay, so for the first premise, we know that we have a conditional statement, which means we are over here. Okay, we know that. We also know that the T is in the consequent position. Okay, so that's going to be right there, and that's going to be right there. And now we're going to ask ourselves, are they consistent? Yeah, they're both true. So in this case, it really doesn't matter what this is right here. Just by the very fact that that T is in that position, that automatically tells us that it has to be true. So let me clean this up a little bit so we don't have this mess here. Okay, so now we already know that inside of here has to be true. We have no idea what not O is, but it doesn't matter because we're already forced into a true situation. Okay, and now we have an antecedent for the larger picture. So now we're going to go back up and we're going to look at first premise holistically. So in other words, the whole problem as a whole. Okay, so let's clean this up over here. And now we're still at a conditional because right here is our conditional. Okay, and now we have a true as our antecedent. Okay, got it. Now, is it consistent? No. But remember, we need to make this true. So this one right here is no longer an option. This over here has to be true. Okay, and we have to use the tilde because that's the main operator on that side of the equation. Okay, so now we have if true, then true, which will give us true. Okay, so we got that worked out. And now we're going to go inside of the parentheses. So if the outside of the parentheses is true right here, then we know the inside has to be false. Okay, so now let's ask ourselves, let's clean this up. Okay, so let's ask ourselves, how many times do you get a false with a wedge? Well, we're right here. you get 1 time. So now we know that Z has to be false and not A is false and A is true. So by working out the first premise, now we have a lot more information. Okay, so we can put the Z over here is false and the A as true. Okay, so we got the first premise worked out, we got that one to work out, we got the conclusion done. Now we're going to start working on the second premise and see, does it work? Okay, so we know that if true, then false. So we got if true, then false. We'll just go up here, if true, then false. Bam, false. Okay, now we'll go look at it from a holistic standpoint here. So we have a false over here with a conjunction, and that's not really going to force us into anything. Although we do have a wedge here. So if we have a wedge, here, and we need it to be true. And we already know that one side of it is false. So the only way we can try and make this work is if this over here is true. So if you don't understand that, let's go up here and look. So we have a disjunction. We need it to be true. So obviously that's not going to be an option for us. And if you'll look, true, 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 false, false, true. Okay, they all have a true in there. So the only way we can make this second premise here work is this has got to be true over here because we've already forced this to be false over here. Okay, now we got to ask ourselves, and by the way, we are right here. We are looking at this section right here. I know it's kind of a mess, but stick with me here. Okay, so now we're going to go over and we're going to look at our conjunction. So we're over here now. Okay. Now the only way you can get a conjunction to be true is right there. They both have to be true. But we've already forced Z to be false. So what that means is this is never going to work. There's a contradiction. So once you find that contradiction, put a box around it, just like my notes say, and you automatically know that you cannot force this to be invalid. It's just never going to work. Therefore, it's valid. Okay, hopefully that made sense. Let's start on our next one. Okay, same process. You notice I already got it set up here for us. So we got a true, we got a true, we got a true, we got a false. Let's go ahead and do this. We got premise 1, we got premise 2, premise 3, and we got a conclusion. So if you're wondering why sometimes I only have 2 T's and sometimes I have 3 T's, it depends on how many premises I'm given. Okay, now we also want to go through, we want to figure out, are we forced into any situation? Just ask simple questions to begin with. Okay, we got a triple bar with true, 2 options. Nope. We got a horseshoe with true, 3 options. Nope. We got a horseshoe with true, 3 options. We got a wedge with a false. Now we're getting somewhere. So we got a false here, so we automatically know we got M is false, and we got not A as false, so that makes A true. Okay, we got the conclusion to work. We got a little something to start with. Let's see how far it can take us. So M is going to be false over here, and A will be true here. And I'm going to be honest, that did not help us out very much, did it? All right, well, we got a little bit something to work with. I'm thinking we go to the second premise, because at least there we have an antecedent, and I think we can figure out the consequent, okay? So let's go up to our cheat sheet up here. First and foremost, we are right here. We are looking at our horseshoe, and we already know that we have an antecedent that is true. So here's our 2 antecedents that are true. And we already know we need this as our answer. That's not an option. We can't have a false. We got to force it to be true. So therefore, we automatically know that not O has to be true. So not O has to be true, so that makes O false. So we got that one to work. Hopefully this will get us a little bit farther. So we got O is false. Let's put that one right there. And that's it. Okay. So we're going to have to work on this first premise here because, as you can see with the third premise, we got nothing. We're not going to go there yet. So we're going to go to the first premise and see what we can do. Okay, so I believe we're going to have to start looking at this from a smaller portion. So again, holistically looking at the whole first premise, there are two options available to us, right? So we know we need to make it be true. So if we look here, we're at a triple bar. We got true here, we got true here. Okay. So that means we got true, true, and false, false will give us what we want. So let's see now, does this one or does this one force us into a situation? Because if those force us, then we know we just got to make the other side the same. Okay. So let's take this first one, little section right here, and let's look at this one. Okay, so we got a conjunction. So we got our dot here. And we know that there's an F in there. Okay, so that means that's not an option. It's never going to happen because we already know that M is false. And if you guys will notice, there seems to be a little bit of a consistency there, doesn't it? So it doesn't even matter what Z is really. We already know it's going to be false. So let's just put that in there. Okay. So now that we know that one side of a biconditional is false, if we look up here, remember we need it to be true. And that's not going to be an option. We already know that one side is false. So our only option is the other side has got to be false as well. Okay, so the negation on the outside is where I need to put that false. And then on the inside, I know I need it to be true. So I don't know what R is right now, but it doesn't matter. I know overall everything inside of these parentheses has to be true because I need the opposite false out here in order for this to work. Okay, so now let's go look at disjunction. So we got disjunction right here. And let's ask ourselves, we need a true. Okay, so we're down to just these right here. Not an option. We also know there's a false in there, so that's not going to work. And just look at it. You get a false, true, true, false. R is forced to be true. Okay, we got it to work. And we just got to fill in over here. And all we have is R is true. This is a bad problem. I don't have B anywhere, right? I don't want to make a mistake here. Okay. So, we have by the way, we're on the third premise now. So we know R is true, and we know that because it was forced to be over here. So now we have to ask ourselves, we have a disjunction, and we know that part of it is true. So let's look up here, disjunction. Part of it is true. Okay, true, 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 disjunction. Doesn't matter what J is. It just does not matter what J is because as long as R is true and we have a disjunction, everything inside the parentheses, it's true already. It's a done deal. Okay? So now we're going to ask ourselves, does this work? Okay, so we know we have a conditional. So now we are over here. We know overall we need the answer to be true. So we got this one, and this one will help us. We know that our antecedent is true. So that's going to be here. That's going to be here. Those two are no longer an option. And this one is attached to that false, which we do not want. So we know what not B is. Our little chart up there told us. Not B has to be true. So we have if true, then true, which will give us what we want. So we got this one to work. And since we were trying to force it to be invalid, and we were successful, it is invalid. Okay, now we're going to go for a little bit harder. So when I said earlier that you normally only have to do one line, it doesn't always work out that way. So sometimes you have to do multiple lines. And this is going to be an example of multiple lines. So let me show you what we're talking about. So first of all, we have premise 1. We have premise 2. Premise 3. And premise 4. And your conclusion. Okay, so that's why I have 4 T's and 1 F. So I have all of it laid out. Now, let's ask ourselves, basic question, main operator. How many times do you get a true with a horseshoe? 3 times. True with the horseshoe, 3 times. Biconditional, true, twice. How many times do you get a true with the disjunction? 3 times. Seen a pattern so far? And at the end, we have a false with the biconditional, 2 times. So when you are not forced into any type of situation, when you first go through and do those questions, that's when you know you have to do multiple lines. Now, in theory, you could do the lines, multiple lines here, 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 or here. It does not matter. However, I am lazy, and I'm going to do the easy one. Okay, so I'm going to start with the conclusion. Why? Because I only get a false twice. And yeah, I could do this one, but it just seems convenient to start at the one end and work my way back. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and look at the biconditional. I know I need a false, so I know I need these 2 right here. Now I'm going to look over here, and bam, those are the ones I need. Okay, so I need to make not O true, and then not R false, and then I need to do the second one, false and true. Okay, so that automatically tells me that O is false on this line, and then on this line, O is true. And then on the top line here, F is true, and then on the bottom line here, R is false. Okay? Now, you do this just like we've done the other ones. Fill it in and start working it out. Just start on one line and see if it works. So if you have one line like this one, and you end up being successful and you make it invalid, you're done. However, if you are not successful and you get a contradiction, you have to go on to the next line. If you're successful there, then it's invalid. If it's not, if neither line is successful, you find a contradiction on both lines, then it will be valid. Okay, so just remember that. Okay, so let's start filling this in and see what happens. So we have not R, so we'll just go ahead and fill it in as false. And we have R, which is going to be true, and that's it. So now we have an O, which not O is going to be true, so we'll just fill that in. And we have an O over here, which will be false. Okay, so let's start with this first line, and let's see how far we get. So we know that not R has to be false. We know we need it to be true. We already know with the disjunction, the only way to make that work is if we force A to be true. Okay, we got that one to work. So we'll fill in A over here, so that's going to be false. So A is true right here, so I know not A has to be false. Okay, let's go here. We know that one side of a biconditional is true, and we know that they have to be the same in order for this to work and make it true. So we're just going to go ahead and make Z true. And then we make that one work. And then we'll just put Z down here and we'll fill that in. Okay. M here, we can make this false, or we can make this true. So if false, then true will give me true. If true, then true will give me true. I'm not really forced into any situation. They both work, to be honest with you, so kind of feels like it's done, but we don't really know what M is yet. And by the way, what can happen is it's very possible that F can remain both false and true at the same time. So what that means is there's multiple lines that makes it invalid. Okay, so let's go over this first premise now. So we have false dot t. So we have false dot t. That'll give us false, so we already know that. On the outside will be true. Okay, so now we have an antecedent that is true. So we'll look here. We have an antecedent that is true. That's not an option because we need it to be true. So we know it has to be if true, then true. So we look over here, and we need everything inside of this parentheses to be true. And for those of you who've already seen it, you know this is just not going to work, because with a conjunction, the only time you can ever make it true is when they're both true, and we've already forced one side of it to be false, so not going to happen. So that means we were not successful. Okay, we got to go to the next line. See if that one will get it done for us. Okay, so we got, by the way, we're just going to pay attention to this line right now. This one, the top one, didn't work. We have a contradiction, and it ended up being right there. Okay, so we have O is true, we have not O is false, okay, and then we have O is true over here, okay, and we got R, you got not R is true, put that down, and we got R is false. Okay, let's just start working this out. So if you notice here, we have a disjunction. Sorry, we're on the fourth premise here. We have a disjunction. One side is true. We need it to be true. So it's kind of already worked out to be true, because true or true gives us true, and true or false gives us true. So we're not really forced into anything, but it kind of works overall. Okay, so we have a biconditional. We're on the third premise. We have a biconditional, half of it is false, so that means Z is forced to be false as well, so that we can get that to be true in the middle. So let's put the Z in over here as false. And we have a consequent that is false, so let's look up here and see what we're going to be forced with. So we have a consequent that is false, so there's our two consequences. And if we look, we need it to be true, so that is not an option. So we are left with this one. So we're going to have it be if false, then false, and that will give us what we want. So that means M over here is false. This time we got it figured out. Okay, so we got that one, that one, that one. Although premise 4 is questionable, but it does work. Alright, let's just fill this out and see what happens. So we got T at dot F. So anytime you have an F with a conjunction, you know it's going to be false. Do the tilde on the outside. It's going to switch it. Kind of looking like the one above it, isn't it? Okay, so now we have a consequent that is true. So if true, we can't have this be false over here. It's got to be true. Same problem. Exactly the same problem. So we ended up right where we were before. That's just not going to work. So this one didn't work. This one didn't work. Therefore, this argument is valid. So remember, you have to do multiple lines when you first go through and ask yourself how many times. So here we did premise 1, how many times you get a true with a horseshoe? 3 times. How many times you get a true with a horseshoe? 3 times. How many times you get a true with a biconditional? Twice. How many times you get a true with a disjunction? 3 times. How many times you get a false with a biconditional? 2 times. We never had it where there was one time. So therefore, you're forced to do multiple lines. And it's perfectly fine to be lazy like me and choose the one that only has 2 lines. Okay, again, if you have any questions, please email me.